Dr. Wendy Oliver-Pyatt.
Okay, I'm mic'd. I feel like this is practice for my TED Talk because I got the mic on. So it's really funny that I'm sitting here with my computer and my PowerPoint because I forgot that we weren't doing PowerPoints. And so my computer and my PowerPoint is like my transitional object. I'll try not to sit and read from it, but I've never done a talk without a PowerPoint. So I'm just going with this. And I'm releasing my shame around not doing it, totally without a PowerPoint. So I know this is a very loving audience, so I feel good about that. So just a little background. So I was at some conference and I saw this conscious recovery booth and I was like, what on earth is this? So I went over to the booth, I started reading all about it. You don't know this part, but I saw the booth and then I was like, I'm gonna find this guy, so you might not remember, I actually met you at a conference, but I think you forgot, but that's okay, because it was really busy. But then I started kind of following you a little bit, and then I got in touch with you because I wanted to bring conscious recovery into my treatment program because I think it's brilliant, I think it's underutilized, and it really resonated with me. But the idea that the core self, the essence of who we are, is a very pure, we have these pure souls that we simply want to love and be loved. We do want to do our best, and we want to have connection, and we want to have meaning, and we want to manifest things that we are capable of. I think we all come out like that. And what I loved about conscious recovery was that it allowed those who struggle with addictions to see themselves through that lens. And although my program doesn't treat primary addiction, we treat mental health conditions at Galen Hope and eating disorders at Galen Hope and within eating disorders, but we all are treating people who have some sort of injury of the soul. And through this connection to your authentic self, that is really, an acceptance of the authentic self is how connection and in that state of being your authentic self is really the power, that's where healing really happens. So that was kind of a little bit of background of what happened. And then when TJ asked me to do this, he called me and we were talking. I was like, well, I've been really wanting to do this talk about shame. I was thinking about doing a talk about the evolution of shame, but I really wasn't sure. I thought that didn't quite sound right. I was like, oh, that's perfect. Let's do that. And I was like, okay. And then I was just been so excited to do this talk ever since you sort of thought it was a good idea because I really love this subject. And I think it's something we all share in common as human beings. And yet, I don't think in our day-to-day life and also just in treatment experiences, I really don't think there's enough attention really zeroing in on how are we actually doing on this core emotion that drives a lot of different forms of behaviors that kind of tend to backfire. And I think a more pointed, intentional focus on how we're dealing with that is something that's really important. I also think that being informed by the idea that our patients are in some way, shape, or form struggling with shame on some level, we can sort of assume that, I think, obviously not every, but I think we can kind of assume that. That helps us stay focused on we have to make sure we're digging in there. I think a lot of treatment has become very mechanical with the evidence-based flurry out there, and that more humanistic, just the connection and the authentic connection is just something that doesn't get enough attention. And I think over time now there's more and more. I have a talk that's about the breakthroughs, and one of the things that's really been a breakthrough since I've been doing this is really integrating, instead of just evidence-based, double-blind, placebo-controlled stuff, is lived experience. Lived experience has really informed all of the breakthroughs that you hear about, almost all the breakthroughs that you hear about that become evidence-based. Let's take Marsha Linehan, somebody who had a severe problem with her own mental health. Through her lived experience, she came out of that DBT. Francine Shapiro, anybody know who she is? Who? Tell us.
EMDR.
Yay! She started EMDR. And she had her own lived experience of trauma. Her sister had cancer, and she was walking through a park. This is a story, and she was gazing in the park, and had this revelation around how it was helping her. So these are people who, no doubt, had shame, in what they were dealing with, and through their own healing, a lot has come from it. But it's the evidence base that we really miss out a lot. And when you really start talking to people, I mean, it's the lived experience that we're missing out on. When you really talk to people and you really get to know them on a deep level, you'll find that shame. But I think it really gets overlooked in a lot of the treatment that I see happening now as it's become a little bit more mechanical. So that's kind of a little bit why I love talking about it. So we're going to talk just a little bit about some of the background that I think is kind of interesting. Is that Darwin in 1872 actually wrote a book called The Expression of the Emotion in Man and Animals. And it was actually the first study of emotion. And according to Paul Ekman, he said it's the book that began the science of psychology. So we think of Darwin as this Darwinian evolutionary biologist, but he actually was very interested in the evolution of emotion as well. And so he really started to think about it in different ways. And he thought of 3 principles of emotion that I think are very, very interesting. He talked first of the principle of serviceable habit, which is that things evolve, that at one time probably had a function, but people still do them, even though over time they no longer have a function. And the example is, how like a dog circles and circles and circles and circles, like, well, when you're looking at them going, what are they doing? Well, at one point they were probably in the bush or whatever, and they had to find their little place to hide in the bush, but it still kind of goes on with them now. So that was one, sort of idea. Another principle he had is of antithesis, which is that people do behaviors that are actually associated with certain emotions, and the opposite kind of behaviors that are sort of associated with opposite emotions. So there's a tie between like what we're doing physically, like if you think about a cat getting ready to pounce, or what we do sometimes, when we're in a state of preparation for battle or whatever, that there's a correlation to our emotions and like our physical posture, and it's sort of opposite depending on the continuum there. So he thought of that concept, which I think is kind of amazing if you think about there wasn't anything, nobody was talking about this, and he like just literally came up with these ideas, and when you think about them, like, that really, really makes a lot of sense. And then he talked about the principle of action, which is just that our bodies just do stuff that's not in our control when we feel certain things, like before we do a talk, like our heart rate goes up, So there's things that we just do that are physiological, that are not within our control, that have emotional context. So to be honest with you, when I was getting ready for this and I was like digging into this, I was like, this is so amazing. I just couldn't, to think about that, there was really nobody, this was the first time anybody really was talking about emotion and studying the concept of emotion, and just absolutely fabulous stuff. And he started to talk about the emotion of shame. He talked about physiologically, what did we do? Blushing, eyes changing position, looking down to the ground. So he started to notice this connection between the emotion of shame and like our body language and posture. Again, nobody had written about it. He talked about shame and different kinds of emotional expression, like downward gaze avoidance, head movement, posture, covering the face. I'm ashamed, covering. And just avoidance too, which is really, really interesting. And shame serves many different purposes according to many different theories. And one of the things I will do in this talk as I kind of continue on is give you different kind of backgrounds on different people's theories about it. But I want to talk a little bit about a guy who is under-recognized. This is a guy called Gershman Kaufman. And has anybody ever heard of this guy? Because I never had. I literally don't know how I found this guy. Don't even know. But he talks about interpersonal needs and shame binds. And that's where I got really excited, because it really helped me understand the concept of shame binds, which really for me tied into understanding eating disorders better. At least it gave me a framework, you know, and I think it's nice to have a framework. You can always tweak it, but it's nice to have a framework. So I will kind of talk a little bit about different theories that different people had, just like kind of briefly. But so some say that, well, okay, let's make it a little more fun. What do you guys want to, what do we think that, like, the shame is there. It's an emotion that's been preserved over evolution, right? It's here, we have it. Why does shame exist? Like, why do we feel shame? Where does it come from? What's the point of it?
Sometimes it's the innate curating of growing up within the family unit. You're being taught by listening to the words of being put down, or getting that great compliment and immediately following up with an insane put down, and now the original compliment loses all power.
Yeah.
It disappears.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Is there another comment on that?
It's a tool for control as well.
Yeah, the tool for control. That's really well said.
Correcting behavior.
Correcting behavior, yeah. And so some talked about, some earlier thinkers on the subject talk about shame as a social function to create social order. So it creates and regulates societal hierarchies also. And it's also responsible for the aversive effect of social rejection. So social rejection is really the maintenance, how we really maintain social norms. We don't want to be rejected. So when we experience, shame, we want to avoid social rejection, so we do stuff to avoid getting rejected, and shame is like the guard. Shame is the police officer to make sure you don't get socially rejected. So of course, I'm going to jump ahead, but we're doing Weight Stigma Awareness Week right now, right? And weight stigma, okay, is all about internalization of shame, right? It's all about oppression upon the soul and the psyche of human beings based on social expectations that generally deny biological, preordained biology, and which of course makes our society very sick. And that's why we have such a problem in our society with eating. We have the concept of normative discontent, which is the normalization of food and body preoccupation. We have a tremendous amount of disordered eating, and then we have eating disorders. But let's just remember that short of an eating disorder, just disordered eating is a state of hell. It is not fun to not be at peace in your relationship with food. And normative discontent is the holiday party, the birthday party, the family gathering, and the anxiety and the fear and the body talk, the diet talk, the compensatory restriction, the anxiety. This really zaps joy out of our souls to have a conflicted relationship within ourselves, with our own body, and with our relationship with food, because of course eating is a very innate and very important experience for human beings. And by the way, it is a very private experience also in some sense, as far as like the pleasure goes of it. It's like we each have our own sense of how we feel when we eat, but yeah, at the same time it's very social. So so weight stigma really comes into this thing about social order. Here's a quote from Heidi Maybaum, who writes a lot about shame. The most common view of shame is that it's an intensely negative emotion directed at the self as a result of having failed to live up to some standard, ideal, or norm. Right? Shame is largely about failing to live up to public norms, standards, and ideals. So it's an idea, the feeling of shame is that we're innately flawed. We're just innately flawed, who we are. And it's got a self-conscious, and a negative self-conscious emotional experience. And it does cause self-evaluative ruminations as well, that are degrading and pervade through the whole being. So calling it a shame spiral, you know, is a good way. Oh, you're having, you know, and so you have to sort of, oh, I'm going on the shame, you know, you see how that can happen. Of course, folks with, in particular, eating disorders go through this shame spiral oftentimes with every time they eat. One of the things I try to help people understand specifically about eating disorders is that the person with the eating disorder, a lot of times they're just trying to avoid having a shame spiral. Because it feels, the post-eating wave of shame and disgust is extremely aversive. So the person is trying to avoid that. And people forget about that. That's why in good eating disorder treatment, you have to do a lot of exposure therapy, and you have to do post-meal process, because the person's spinning out, and so once they spin out, what do they do next? They restrict. And that leads to the whole cycle. And that rumination of, and there's that disgust. We'll talk a little bit more about shame and disgust. Milvan also talks about it's a failure to live up to etiquette norms, like being polite, wearing appropriate attire, moral norms, not stealing, not lying, not cheating, and then personal standards too, which is like just being, you know, I have to be this or that. So that's where we see there's a connection between perfectionism as a trait, as a genetically different personality traits such as perfectionism are genetically mediated traits. There's a very high correlation between perfectionism and eating disorders, right? Because that person with an eating disorder, and this isn't only about eating disorder, by the way, just, of course, I've done eating disorders for 20 years, so I kind of drift into that now and then, but people with eating disorders have a very high expectation very often of themselves. That's why we see, you know, we've got, you know, in my million, like, oh, we've got the three Dartmouth students and the 2 Princeton students, and then over there's the law school student, you know, there's very high standards, and perfectionism is a lot of time, you know, I was talking about eating, you're avoiding the post-meal shame. Perfectionism, a lot of times when you really dig into what the person's experiencing, they're trying to make sure they don't feel terrible about not doing whatever they think that they need to do. So there's this incredible standard, and if they don't do the thing that they think they have to do, there's like incredible like shame spiral. So perfection and shame is very interconnected, and perfection and eating disorders is very connected. So moving along, one of the things I thought would be kind of interesting for us to do was to ourselves have our own little experiential together, if you would like to do that, where I've done this before one time, and I thought it might be kind of healing and interesting for us to do it together. If everybody would be willing to take a piece of paper out and write something that you feel ashamed about. And it will not be disclosed publicly. I will read them, but of course you're going to crumble it up, and then I also want you to throw the shame. I want you to just throw that freaking shame, because I also kind of want to kind of let you have that feeling of throwing it. Throw the shame, like maybe right here, and then I'm going to stick it in a bag. You guys can write down something you feel ashamed about. Yeah, I like that, a good throw. And then maybe we can get a little bag. Does anybody have a little bag I can use?
Anyone need paper?
I love it. Thank you for throwing it. I need a bag. I need a bag. Can I use that bag?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to get you a new bag.
Okay.
Can we grab,
Throw me
grab
some
a gift
more.
bag?
Get rid of your shame. Woo! Yeah. I love this. All right, hold on. How do you guys feel about hearing about other people's shame? Like us being able to talk about it in an open way. Is it kind of interesting?
That's it.
More? Got it.
I'll get it.
I got it.
Okay.
Okay? So, why does it feel good to throw our shame and to share our shame? I'll give it to you later. Why do you guys think it feels good to just throw it and share it?
It's a release.
It's a release, yeah.
Well, and there's a community,
Yeah, connection, release, amazing. Yes,
right? I
Mela.
think when you keep something inside, it grows.
It
to
does.
be more than maybe it started out. So by like putting it down on paper and throwing it,
Yeah.
or like speaking about whatever that release is, it just
Yeah.
like
It does. I totally feel that. Yes.
Feels good to put some force behind.
Doesn't it? It feels. She said it feels good to put some force behind. That's why I was like, throw it up. Throw it. There was another.
You realize it's universal.
Yeah, I love that. The principle of universality. That's like one of the principles of good group treatment is the principle of universality, right? Isn't that whatever that guy is that wrote the group guy or whatever?
It's just that we're bound together as
Yeah.
humans by our weaknesses. And our
Yeah,
strengths.
it's such a good feeling to know that the universality of shame. I think somebody was in the blue shirt.
Diane stole my
Oh!
and other people have the exact
Same crap. No
And
kidding.
Someone holding on to the same exact shame as
Right.
mine, then mine feels
Right.
less significant. Oh, other
Yeah.
people share this too. I'm not
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah, 100%. And that is why two things come to my mind about therapy, helping people heal. When we think about why does it feel good to throw the shame. One is that what's that principle of physics? Like you have to like some kind of force coming this way, you got to force it back that way. There's some law of physics in there. Not the object of motion. Thank you. With every action, there needs to be equal and opposite. So when somebody's feeling shame, it's super, super, super intense. So if you're just sitting there in therapy in your little chair in your individual therapy and you're talking about your shame, that's not a bad thing. But some of the things that people have to work out have to have, I think it's helpful to have some physicality woven into it. Like we need to get out of our little bubbles of just sitting in chairs, and we need to like do some stuff. You know, that's how come one of the things we do is we love scale bashing. We're like, yeah, let's go. You know, we love scale bashing. So in the field of eating disorders, it's the best. And the other thing is that is why I really believe in the power of the milieu. I'm a big milieu gal. I think that profound healing comes in the setting of a group experience. Not a big, gigantic group where it's roll call, but an intimate group experience where people can actually be authentic with each other. And like you said, the power of universality. So that's really the setting. And so is what we're talking about, some evidence-based stuff. Like, no, we just know this. We just know it feels good to throw it, and we know it feels good to talk about it and to share about it. And it does actually heal us, and it releases us from that poison, because shame is actually very poisonous to our soul. So, without further ado, I will shake up the shame bag, and we're going to discover a little bit about each other now that we might not have known had we not had this time together, and had we not had also one other thing. We had courage in this room, right? We didn't have avoidance. We had courage, and we had interest, right? So we did something together. You know, you guys, I mean, different audiences, I could have never done this. 100%. You guys, I just kind of felt like I could. Thank you guys, because it's, when we have authenticity, it's so much more freaking meaningful, right? Isn't this like better than like reading some book or me reading a PowerPoint? my little transitional, but I still have it here. Just in case I want it. By the way, are we stopping promptly at 5? Tell me exactly when.
2 minutes before 5.
Okay. I just want to keep track of time. I'm very good about being punctual, just so you know, because I don't want to do anything that I'd feel bad about by keeping you guys running late. Oh, there's a clock right there. Okay, good. Aw, hurting my family when I was in an active addiction. That's a tough one, and I'm sure your family learned a lot and grew a lot and is so pleased with the work you've done to no longer be in active addiction. Thank you for sharing that, whoever shared it. Shyness. The person feels ashamed about the shyness. Well, you know, shyness is very genetic also, by the way. It's not something that you just sign up for necessarily at the grocery store or whatever. Like, it's something that's just like kind of hardwired into some of us. And it's another thing. Exposure therapy also helps with that too. Doing it together, gradual, supported exposure therapy, good thing for that. I'm glad whoever was shy shared that they were shy. I hope that felt like a step in the other direction of being shy. Oh, this is related, introversion. Gosh, you don't have to feel ashamed about being introverted. It's okay, right? I think so. Except we want to know more what you're thinking. So, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, I know that feeling. What am I doing? Oh my gosh, imposter syndrome. Why did TJ ask me to do this? I'm really just this scruffy person that you can mad at. Everybody's faking everybody out. Oh my gosh. Aw, being single because of your body size. Well, you know what? Anybody that's not drawn to you because of your body size, F them. Like, no. And honestly, there's wonderful humans out here in the world of all sizes, so it's okay. I know that's simply put, but I still had to say it. Aww, being a stepmom? It's okay to be a stepmom. You can let go of that one. Easier said than done, right? I really appreciate that I get to share these with you all. Are you guys wanting me to keep going? You want to hear more? Okay. Because we could do this for a while, but you know, my weight all of my life. Okay, anybody that has any weight thing that you feel shame about, please, I beg you, please go to WaistStigmaAwarenessWeek.com. There's a different way to be in this world. It is time for fat liberation. It is time for size acceptance. It's time for weight inclusivity. And it's time for people to let out a roar and not let others invade their sense of well-being, health, and beauty based on body size and shape. Please, please, please go to WaistStigmaAwarenessWeek.com. There is a community. There is a community out there. We started it in the eating disorder space with the Binge Eating Disorder Association. It's still here and it's growing, and there's just a lot more that's understood about the poison of stigma and why we feel the way we do. Weight stigma is rooted in anti-blackness and racism, by the way. So there's a lot to learn, and there's a community for you. I really want you to come to WaistStigmaAwarenessWeek.org because you'll, or com, it's .com or .org. Relapsing on drugs and alcohol. Okay, somebody from the audience talk to this person, please. Can somebody talk to this person who said they felt shame about relapsing on drugs or alcohol? Who can talk to that person? Just stand up and say something to whoever that was. Somebody, please.
Forgive yourself.
Forgive yourself. Any other?
Every day is a new beginning. Never quit.
One day at a time.
One day at a time. That's right.
Anybody else? Please talk to that person. Say something. Give some. Relapse is a part of our story too.
Sometimes the strongest recoveries come out of a relapse.
Sometimes the strongest recoveries out of relapse.
Progress doesn't look like this.
That's
So like-
Progress doesn't look like
And
this.
we both end up here at the end, so.
That's right.
There you go.
You're not failing. Sorry.
No.
You're not failing. You're finding out like what's working and what you need to do to succeed.
You're not failing, you're discovering. You're discovering.
Redirect.
You're discovering. So a lot of this too, to help with any form of like relapse is really about releasing that shame. Fucking release that shame. Release that shame. Release that shame. Connect. Okay? That shame is silencing you. And it's a prison. Release that shame. Connect. And then guess what? Listen. Let somebody help you. Let them bring in their soothing, their healing, their wisdom, their love. Absorb that. Listen. But you got to start by taking that jump forward and releasing. Thank you for whoever shared that. Yes.
Everybody raise your hand if you've relapsed. Yes. You're not alone.
Thank you.
Participation in life. You're actually sitting in this room right now,
There you go.
participating and validating with us.
Woo! You're participating. Now, one thing about shame. Okay, this is really interesting. Ha! I'm away from my PowerPoint. I'm away from my PowerPoint. I might go back though. But one thing that I was reading about when I was reading about shame and digging further into it is that shame is tied in with like the concept of disgust, right? And there's a lot of disgust that's also tied in with bodily disgust. And there's some theories that shame and disgust, and that's tied in also with social avoidance. And the root of that was actually to reduce the risk of spreading infectious disease. So some of this disgust, disgust leads to avoidance. So that is kind of wild when you think about, and that's like what I was gonna say Freud, not Freud, this is Darwin, sorry. This is what Darwin was talking about when he talked about, the dogs that circle around. He was talking about that kind of emotion. So this whole thing about disgust and avoidance, we don't realize we're still kind of maybe doing something that's tied back to avoidance of spreading disease.
Yes.
Isn't that wild? So that disgust makes us feel inhibited about connecting, and that's why what you said I thought was so powerful. Because it's really hard when you feel that shame and that self-loathing to actually not isolate. It's really freaking hard to not isolate. And so whoever put that out there, you are here in the room, and we are really glad that you're here and you have something to offer this group. Because we all have so much inside of us to offer that's beautiful. We really do. We are wonderful creatures. We're interesting little animals. We are a trip. That's what I love about doing my work. It's like everything, I say, I don't want to go to the moon. I don't want to take a space shuttle. Like, I get to be a therapist. I get to talk to people about their mind and their soul. Like, I don't need to go to outer space. Like, I get to go into somebody's world and like discover what's going on inside. That's the best trip ever. Wait something. I couldn't quite read it, but wait and something with my family. Well, families are the #1 perpetrators of weight stigma. #1. Guess what's #2? Guess who's #2 perpetrator of weight stigma? Doctors. Doctors are awesome at causing poisonous weight stigma. Oh, guess what happens? Guess what happens to people who go to doctors and experience weight stigma?
They don't go to doctors.
Right. Katie's cheating. She's giving everyone. Yes, it's a cycle. You go to the doctor says, get on the scale. Oh my gosh, we just did a fireside chat. Sorry, I'm going to come back to this in a second. Don't let me forget what we were going to talk about. But we just did this fireside chat, and we were talking about this issue of healthcare providers causing shame. And actually, I'm doing a talk on that tomorrow, as a matter of fact. So in the room, we started talking about this, and man, so many people go through this. It's crazy. People go to doctors, experience weight stigma, and then don't go back to doctors, and they miss out on getting screening exams. They don't get their mammograms. They don't do their pap smears. They don't do their labs. They don't do basic medical care because they're trying to avoid having a shaming experience. One of the people in our room told me how she went in to the doctor with a health, this happened just right before this event that we had. Went to the doctor for a medical condition, came out with a diet. Another person in one of the work groups I was working on had just come from the doctor herself, had the weight stigmatizing experience, and stuffed it and just couldn't see anything, just kind of went along, shoved it all in, went up to the car and was just like bawling. So weight stigma, doctors, and family, it's bad news, and it does not lead to health. Shame, excuse me? Oh yeah. BMI is BS, by the way, in case anybody was wondering. We could talk about that for a long time. It is not based on anything scientific, literally. My current job performance, sometimes we're in jobs. I mean, I don't know anything about whoever wrote that down, but I'll just say sometimes we're in jobs that don't match us that well, or just like kids with ADD go to schools and they feel shame because they can't do everything according to social expectation, and kids with ADHD get a lot of internalized shame too because they sort of have failure to kind of perform according to the social norms, so they deal with a lot of secondary depression related to internalized stigma as well, so job performance. So on that subject, would you tell a kid who's having a trouble time in school, like, oh, something to be ashamed of? You say, oh, this school thing isn't really working for you. So sometimes we have to mix and match. There's certain jobs I would be really bad at. Ooh, really bad. If I had to write policies and procedures for my job, I'm so happy I have people that like to do that. I just love that. I have people like that are like, we could just talk about it and be like, I'm gonna write it up. I'm like, oh, thank you. Anger blowing up. Okay. What do we want to say about the person? What are some things we want to say to that person for the anger blowing up thing? What do we want to tell them? Sorry?
What are you afraid of?
What are you afraid of? Okay. Some other wisdom to share? This is a wise group, I think. Yes, you can stand up. Okay, or not. I just want to make sure people hear you, honestly.
No, yeah, there's a great book called Shame, and it talks about shame rage, and it makes it such a simple dot to dot. That's the same thing we'll talk about, that this is energy. And
Right.
it happens so fast that the rage, the anger is just a protective mechanism and a way to release it in a way that isn't vulnerable.
Right, and so,
Common.
yeah.
It's called shame.
Well, and one of the things that when you talk about rage and shame, that's very, very interesting, is that when you feel shame, a lot of times it's in the eyes of another, right? And so, guess what happens? The rage makes the other person go away. This isn't conscious, right? But, you made me feel shame, right? Now I have rage. Well, you're going to go away. So the impetus of the person, the nidus of the shame after I have the rage, I'm going to be away from it. So, yeah, so that's a very natural kind of.
I found that because people did this to me, so now I'm passing that on. In my rageous moments and my anger moments, you know when you're in it that you just feel so unlovable, and that person isn't.
Can you say that again so everybody can hear you?
Yeah, when I'm angry and I can't control it, and I know I'm in it in that moment, I feel so unlovable. And so I expect that person to rage back, go away, but so when they come to me and say, I love you, in the middle of it,
That's a good tool.
it's the total opposite of what you would think.
That's a very good tool. I think there was somebody that somewhere back there.
I always follow Diane.
Yes, go ahead.
My anger, has been some of my greatest teaching moments.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
like an iceberg. I can just see the tip, which is this
Right.
anger,
Right.
but I couldn't see what was underneath
Right.
the anger. And
Right.
so really it's a blessing when I can see anger.
What do you think is underneath the anger sometimes?
Sometimes there's shame,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes the anger is like the same condition I'm trying to get away from. Is the shame, and now I'm stuck right back in
Yes,
the condition.
that's the shame
I'm not
spike,
escaping
yeah.
it.
That's a
now.
cycle.
It's
Mhm.
a cycle.
But again, that rage is a defense to get the impetus of the shame away from you. So it's a defense. And the next one was also bad temper, fast reactions. So that was similar? Yes, sir?
It takes a long time to kind of self-teaching,
Mm-hmm.
and I know we've all heard it. But
Oh,
it's
let's
just
start
not-
over so you can talk. Everybody can hear you, sir, if that's okay.
Hi. It's often said that it's never invoked, and it's having the ability to pause.
Mm,
When you have that anger and that rage,
such a smart move.
but it's a practice that once you start doing it, and
Yeah.
you see the end results, it then becomes a second nature where you have the ability to pause.
It's a good
But it
tool.
works both ways.
It's a really good tool. It's interesting also in my treatment center, a lot of times when somebody does like a behavior that they're not supposed to do, a lot of times the staff feels the need to say something like, you shouldn't do that, or why didn't you just you just want to say, pause. You could just sit with some, like let's say somebody does something, you could just sit there and be like, okay.
It's not only stopping your rage or anger,
Yeah.
but if you have the ability to pause, it's stopping the other.
Yeah, it
person
gives a
inside.
little space.
Right.
You know, those little space. Retirement isn't financially solid. Can somebody? What we're doing right now, by the way, is we're soothing each other. We're soothing each other, and we do need soothing. And you know, as we grow up, life doesn't get any easier. It gets hard. It's hard, hard, hard. And just like a little child needs to be picked up and soothed, we need to be soothed. We're soothing each other. I love it. I love it when we're soothing each other. Can somebody soothe this person who feels that the retirement isn't financially solid? Can somebody provide some soothing to that person? Please? Somebody in the audience, because I love you guys. Yes?
I like to say that it's not retiring, it's entitlement. So it's your time to do the things you've always wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might have to trim certain things down, you know, figure out your budget, whatever that is. But when you start to do the things that you love, then things may come to you and you may have actually some abundance come in other areas.
Thank you. By the way, I just want to say financials, like being financially solid in a good place, it's really freaking hard. It's not easy. It's not easy. It's a very competitive world that we live in, and it is a complex society. It is not easy for some of us to make money within this social engagement that we're all in, right? I mean, back in the day, I mean, you could just like have a farm or something, you know? Like now it's so hectic. You're supposed to have to learn math and stuff like that.
I was just going to say my dad always believed that, well, he never believed in retirement. So he never would call it that, and he never wanted to retire. And I would say if you're doing something right now that you don't love, then maybe start thinking about what your gifts are and what brings you joy. And maybe you can transition into something that you never want to stop doing.
Yeah, that's a cool thing. I'll tell you one thing. I've had times when I had like no money, and I've had times when I've had more money. I ended up getting divorced after I like made money, and then like my whole life I thought I had a really good marriage. Everything was like cooking, everything was good. All I needed was money, because once I had money, then I was going to pay off my student loans. Everything would be so great. That was just the missing link to everything, was making that money. I made my money, and like within like a year or two, me and my husband were growing apart. He wanted to go to Miami Heat games. I wanted to sit and watch like Netflix. We were in two different worlds. He wanted to spend, Miami. He wanted me to wear white pants. No, that's not me. Different woman, sorry. So yeah, the money does not equal happiness. I kid you not. When we lived in our $526 a month rent control apartment in Harlem, we were very happy. So some people, my sober body and obsession with eating, weightstigmaawarenessweek.com. I promise you there's a community for you. I promise there's a different way. Diet culture sucks. Weight stigma sucks. Shame around being who we are innately sucks. I have 1 minute. Substance use breakdown, we talked about that already. Okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna leave you with one little thing. It's a thing that I like to use or talk about that actually helped me a lot. I read, when I was in medical school and I figured out how to get through my eating disorder by reading like tons of self-help books. I was highlighting because there wasn't really good treatment, so I had to do it that way. It took a lot longer, by the way. I always tell people they're like, did you go to treatment? I was like, well, there was no treatment. Well, I mean, you could do it and go to treatment for 3 months, or you could do what I did and take like 3 years, but I recommend the 3 months. But I read, Eric Fromm, Art of Loving, and one of the things that he talks about, and I use this, is that any kind of art requires concentration, knowledge, respect, and discipline. So whatever art you're doing, it requires concentration, knowledge, respect, and discipline. So when we think about ourselves and we want to figure out the art of loving ourselves, it requires us to concentrate. We have to become mindful. We have to be aware. Concentrate. Knowledge. Through knowledge, we learn forgiveness and self-compassion because we put the pieces of the puzzle together. We understand our behaviors through knowledge. Once we have more knowledge, now we get into respect. We start to respect ourselves. Like, we understand this was this, so we have respect. And then that leads to discipline. And in this case, he talks about Eastern, not Western. Eastern is discipline, that you do something because doing it helps you feel better. It's natural because, like, for me, it's yoga. Like, I don't have to follow some guidebook of how many yoga classes. I don't have to like count my steps because I want to do yoga because it makes me feel good, right? And that's discipline, and it's not the no pain, no gain. It's my body hungers for that. So concentration leads to knowledge. Knowledge leads to respect, and as we respect ourselves, we really want to take care of ourselves, and that's the word where discipline is. Again, not the Western, it's the Eastern discipline, and that discipline, guess what? It leads right back to concentration. When I'm doing that yoga and I'm calming myself down and I'm taking care of myself, I become more mindful. That's the spiral. That's the cycle we want to get in. Now, we all have our little weak points on that cycle, and you can think about where yours is. The opposite of respect is what? What are some other words? Hate. Judgment, right. A lot of people that have a lot of shame, this is where on that cycle you could be on, you slip off and you go into that shame spiral. So being aware of that, that's where I slip off that cycle, let me work on that and get into that positive spiral of concentration, knowledge, respect, and discipline. Last but not least, one of the things I like to help people who have shame, they can lean into shame. By the way, altruistic temperament are people that are also more inclined to shame because they have high expectations of deferring to others. So perfectionism and altruism lead to those kind of tendencies also, in my opinion. So when people have vulnerability to shame, sometimes you just need to pull something out of your pocket. And so one of my little acronyms that I figured out a long time ago is called Choose the Loving Behavior, CTLB. So you can work with your patients on CTLB because sometimes the feeling isn't going to be there. You might still have that shitty feeling of shame, but you can choose, you can say, what is the loving behavior? Choose the loving behavior, going to a meeting, coming out, because feelings chase behavior. We got to do that behavior. Feeling is going to follow. We can't always just wait for that loving feeling to come. We got to go with the behavior, and then we're going to get somewhere. So I use that a lot. CTLB. Your patient's in a chain spiral. You can let's do some CTLB. Let's do some loving behavior right now. You deserve love. And by the way, there's never, ever, ever a reason to not have more love in this universe. I don't care how much shame you feel or how tortured you are, there's never a reason for it to be not anything but good, to bring more love in this world, and that includes loving of ourselves. So we can choose the behavior of loving, even when the feeling is absent and we're consumed with shame. So that's what I got to say about shame today. And I loved this interaction with you guys. I love that you shared this. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that you participated in this way. It was very meaningful to me. I'm so glad that you told me to not have a PowerPoint. And I got to have this experience because of that. Thank you.
Yay. Dr. Wendy Oliver-Pyatt, everyone. Thank you. Oh my goodness. Wow.